Good morning. It is 11:37 a.m. on Sunday, October 9th, 2016. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. So, two quick updates. One, my elbow is not broken. I did get it x-rayed. I suppose that's good, although, I didn't want it to be broken, but at the same time, it was a little annoying to finally go to the doctor and have them say, nope, you just basically need to keep doing the things that you're already doing and it'll just hurt for a while. That'll be some money, please. Uh, it's fine. The other thing is that I'm really not feeling well today. I've got some sort of a congestion and sore throat, and it sucks because I have improv class today, and it is basically there's a small enough number of people in our class that it's a problem for anyone to miss it, and so I really probably need to go anyway, even though I don't feel good, and it's like, ugh. But the reason I'm getting that stuff out of the way quickly is because today is Sunday, and I am continuing my series of talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. Today to talk about episode, what number is it? 7, right? I think it's 7. Oh, God. I know which episode I'm talking about. I believe it's 7, and it is the first of a new two-parter, the Winter Solstice Part 1. And so this is, after a couple of episodes, I don't want to call them filler, but let's call them world-building episodes. This is starting to nudge us back to the A plot. And it's got some really interesting things going on. For one, it introduces the element of the spirit world in a more concrete way, in terms of this not being just sort of the metaphysical, philosophical stuff going on, but something that the characters actually have to deal with in a practical sense. But it also puts Aang in a tricky spot, because this is sort of the first time where he's sort of actually expected to do something as the Avatar. This is the Avatar's job, but he is just utterly unprepared. There's been lots of occasions where he's able to kind of just wing it. He doesn't necessarily know what he's going to do in advance, but it kind of just works out. He acts on instinct, and it all turns out fine. But here, it's harder than that, and he's in a tough spot because he really never learned how to do the various things that he's supposed to be able to do as the Avatar. And who's at fault for that? It seems like it's probably a combination, because on the one hand, we don't have the whole story exactly, but we remember from his flashbacks at the Air Temple that they told him he was the Avatar when he was younger than is typical. And probably that ties into Aang running away and ending up frozen for 100 years. And now not having anyone nearby to tell him what he needs to do. And so it's a tough spot. So when there's this giant spirit that is clearly doing a lot of real damage to this town, it is actually very dangerous. It's even taking people and running off with them and taking them into the spirit world, and so this is a serious threat, and Aang just doesn't know what to do. And we have Sokka, who is very brave, despite being concerned about the danger. But this is one of the first times for Katara where her sort of default, oh, I have faith in the Avatar that he'll know what to do, doesn't really work out. I mean, it does kind of sort of eventually, but only after a period of, okay, let's look for plan B. So we have this giant spirit, and Aang has to figure out how to connect with it. What we eventually discover is that it's angry about a big part of its forest being burned. And we know that this village is not to blame for that. But at the same time, it's a neat illustration about how disconnected the spirit world and the material world in the show are. That they coexist, but without really any communication. And that's sort of what the Avatar's supposed to do, except that Aang has no idea how to do that. But eventually, after discovering that he had entered the spirit world sort of accidentally, we get some rules about that, including that he doesn't have his bending while he's in the spirit world. And also discovering that just like he has Appa as an animal guide, his previous Avatar incarnation, Avatar Roku, had a dragon. Avatar Roku was a firebender, by birth, and had a dragon. And so Aang meets the dragon in the spirit world, and the dragon is able to communicate some things to him. But a lot of it is just kind of forecasting because he can't speak in language. My computer's fan is blowing really hard all of a sudden. Okay. So here's where we get our first indication of the larger threat. We don't know the details yet, but there's some sort of a fireball in the sky. And what Aang has to do in order to be able to speak with Avatar Roku and have a clearer understanding of what's going on is visit this nearby fire temple on the winter solstice when the spirit world and the material world will be closest to each other. The problem is the fire temple in the Fire Nation. So we have to figure out how to get there, how to do this so that he can figure out what's really going on. In the meantime, what it takes ultimately for solving the problem with Hebei, the spirit, is that basically just it's a little tip of here's how you communicate, and also being able to sort of empathize and understand more about what the spirits are, what their nature is, what they might want. And so he's able to reiterate Katara's assurances from earlier that you see these acorns that are left behind that weren't burned up in the fire. They are reassurance that the forest will come back. And that is what's able to pacify the spirit for now, and to have it return the various people. And so Aang was able to accomplish his job ultimately to pacify the spirit, to save the people, but he only after kind of being humbled a bit and having to recognize that there's stuff that the Avatar needs to do. The world needs the Avatar, and Aang is not ready to fulfill those needs yet. And so he's kind of, had sort of a half-hearted, oh, sure, yeah, let's go to the North Pole, we'll learn waterbending, it'll be fun. But this is sort of the first indication for him that it's much more serious than that. And it's not even just about how do we stop the war or any of these broad but abstract sorts of ideas, but it's really been driven home and made personal for Aang now that he's supposed to be doing something and he doesn't know how yet, and so he needs to find out. Meanwhile, we also get Iroh and Zuko, and the show continues in this episode to do something that's really interesting and unusual for a kid's adventure show like this, in the sense that it takes these characters who, like, in theory, are the primary antagonists, except that every time we actually deal with them, we see them in stories where the show puts us on their side. So we see, Zuko irritated with Iroh making his own little hot tub and being irritated, and then Iroh getting caught by Earth Earth Nation soldiers, Earth Kingdom soldiers. And so it's interesting to have us, be rooting for the bad guys in this sense. And it's these early moves for what's a great arc with those characters. We get a little bit more of Iroh's backstory in the sense that we've known for a while that there's something interesting and complex about Iroh, because he's clearly badass when he wants to be, and he clearly has sort of a history of being very important, but that just raises the question, okay, so then why is he wandering around with his disgraced, banished nephew? And so we don't really get more detail about that, but we do find out that he was part of a Fire Nation army that put the capital of the Earth Kingdom, Ba Sing Se, under siege for 600 days, which is a pretty long time. But then the Fire Nation army left, and it was considered a defeat and somewhat of a disgrace for Iroh. And we don't really get an answer for what happened there, because although Iroh gives an answer that it was basically just because he was tired and his army was tired, his men were tired, it's also clear in context that that's the story he's telling these soldiers, because it's all part of him trying to, makes himself fall off of their little mount and leave a sandal behind for Zuko to follow. And so just the idea of, once again, putting what is ostensibly the antagonists of the show, repeatedly putting them into stories where we're empathizing with them and not just watching them do bad stuff. It's interesting, and it continues to develop. So that is part one, the Winter Solstice, part one. And so next week, I will be back with the next episode, Winter Solstice Part 2, and I hope that you continue to enjoy these discussions. And I will talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.